This is a reading from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12, verse 32 and on. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This may sound extreme, but a goal of the spiritual life, of living life as a Christian, should be to eliminate as much as we can all other thoughts and concerns and desires that aren't related to God. Eliminating, casting away, not even thoughts that may directly take us away from God, anxiety, depression, worry, but even thoughts that will distract us, thoughts that are neutral, thoughts about cooking, friends, etc., secular, in a secular and worldly sense. Trying to eliminate those thoughts as much as possible and devote our lives and devote our minds to God. A way I've been seeing can help with this or hinder this is simplicity. Simplicity, maxing, minimalism, that's the topic of this video. So a lot of things on this channel I kind of frame through the lens of like exercise, or kind of applying principles in exercise, learning how to lift, stuff like that, to the spiritual life. And that's what we'll be doing here as well. For a long time, I have not been able to stick with a lifting split. I've talked about this a ton on this video, this channel. And it's true, like 3 or 4 years, literally, of just picking different splits, doing different things, and thinking about it. And as a result of not having something simple, something consistent, something I can stick to, it takes a lot of mental energy. To start with, in the gym, I have to have my phone with me because what am I doing today with that? What the heck did I say I was going to do today? This, and that. Okay. And then I'm like constantly trying to remind myself and remember that. And I need to have it written down because it's different than what I was doing last month, and it's probably complex. I was also a big fan of supersetting everything imaginable, where wanting to maximize the time in my gym, my workout splits would be mighty complex, with bicep curls supersetted with lateral raises, and then push-ups supersetted with pull-ups, and then dips supersetted with, push-ups or something like that. And it's very complicated, and I'm there trying not to forget. That's inside of the gym. Outside of the gym, it's worse. Did I write this split right? Is this the right and optimal way to do something? Should I rewrite this split? Should I redo it? Yada. And lifting, because I've made it so complicated and because I'm overthinking it and because I don't have it set in stone, is becoming something constantly just on my mind, that I'm constantly worrying about, thinking about, fretting about in the gym, but more importantly, outside of the gym, where I'm worrying about how I'm going to rewrite this split. What is the best bicep curl to do? Now, these thoughts aren't, to some degree, they're anxious thoughts. They're not explicitly negative. They're just thoughts about something that is not God, but they're also not necessary at all. Not necessary at all. And I could simply remove them, and I have recently, by sticking to a split, something simple, something I can remember. I think about the gym less, which is a good. That is an amazing good, and it frees up my mind to be at peace and to be more present with God instead of worrying about, when I'm going to do these bicep curls. So the simplicity that I'm talking about in this video is simplicity of mind and possessions. And what I mean by that is when you have all these, so we'll start with simplicity of mind in some different examples or categories. I guess you could consider like the lifting split a thing of simplicity of mind, because it's not physical. It's yes, you're doing something physical, but the idea of it is in your mind. So backtracking just a little bit, we kind of hear about minimalism and simplicity in terms of our possessions. In the verse, Jesus says, "Sell what you have, give to the poor, store up your treasure in heaven." There's another verse I like of Jesus, commissioning or sending out his disciples, and he says, like, don't take 2 bags, don't take 2 staffs. So we kind of know not to get ourselves hooked on possessions. Simplicity of physical things, of not to own too much, not to try to have too many things, as that can weigh us down and can distract us, and they're not necessary. Okay, so that's simplicity of physical things, like the minimalism. But in the spiritual life, I'm learning more and more, it's also very important to adopt that simplicity and that minimalist attitude towards like mental things, towards our thinking, towards routines and stuff of that nature. So I kind of already laid it out in terms of the lifting, because it can be obvious that if you have 5 cars, a 6-car garage, 8 kids, 12 dogs, you're working 2 jobs, you own all these clothes. That is not a simple way to live with material things. And it'll be hard to devote all of your thoughts, all of your energy to God when you have all these material things weighing you down. But like the example I used at the start, mental things can also weigh us down, and we should seek and strive for simplicity in those. Now, other examples besides the lifting split: routine. Constantly thinking about how you're going to do your routine, writing out new routines. And when it's so complex that you have to consult something every day, because it's like 5 minutes this, 5 minutes that, 5 minutes that, instead of just like pray, grab a coffee, and get out the door, you're like forcing your mind to be distracted because your routine is so dang complicated. It's so complicated. We can do this also with exercise, like I talked about, but especially also with diet, with trying to keep a very rigid and regimented diet. It's pretty obvious that you shouldn't be eating McDonald's every day. It's pretty obvious that most of your food should be whole foods. It's pretty obvious you should eat a lot of protein and eat enough, but not too much food. But beyond that, the micromanaging of it and trying to make it so complex of like meal timing, exact macro distribution, to where it's occupying like all your mental space, it can be daunting. It can really take up space from your mind. Now, I will say routine and being routine with what you eat can kind of help in this, because the goal I underlined at the start of this video, our goal of simplicity, which is very obvious in the material things, but not so much the mental things. The goal is to cast away thoughts that aren't of God. Our goal should be to be constantly in the presence of God, which we can do, by the way, with other people, doing other things, like loving others, being in communion with others, friendship, or even thinking about how grateful you are for your life, or there is some necessity of like thinking about or planning the future, your finances, or being grateful looking back on a wonderful experience in high school. We can still do that stuff and be present to God. But it is difficult, and I would say it removes you from God's presence, hyper-focusing, overthinking, worrying about routine, diet, exercise, prayer life, how you're going to do all these things. But again, with that, some degree of routine, I think, is essential to where you're not having to consider what you're going to do or what you're going to eat for breakfast every single day, because then you're adding more thoughts and adding more decisions into your mind. I would also recommend this approach of simplicity to prayer. Trying to do the same prayers, simple, but stuff you can remember, and not a confusing set or labyrinth of elaborate scheme of prayers and Bible readings every single day. For me, every single day, I know I'm going to pray briefly and right when I wake up, right before I go to bed, and then I want to go to Mass, read the Bible, say the rosary, and do mental prayer. I didn't start when I was praying to add all 4 of these things, but they've simply come along and I've developed them, and I don't need an elaborate planner to write them down or fit them in my day. I kind of already know what I'm going to do. I would also recommend with this to simplify your thinking, or write a rule of life, if you will, kind of like a status quo, where if you have a decision to make, or you're worrying about like what you're going to do on a day, and that this is kind of blends with routine, you kind of have a default, giving yourselves like defaults that you can live with. The other thing with this idea of simplicity, kind of trying to keep a routine, keeping defaults, is it's a lot easier to have the simplicity when stuff isn't complex, when it is not too confusing and also not too daunting, to where you can be consistent with it. Simplicity, consistency. Rough sketch, like defaults, routine. That's kind of the idea here. Again, just to reiterate, the goal of the spiritual life, a goal of the spiritual life, is to direct all our thoughts to God, to abide in God's presence as much as we can. It's obvious that we can do this while we're hanging out with others. It's obvious we can do this while being grateful, and it's obvious that at some points we are going to have to think about or plan for the future. Further, it's obvious that negative thoughts about anxiety, depression, and worry take us away from this. But these thoughts of what am I going to do? These thoughts of how am I going to do this? How am I going to pray? How am I going to pray today? When we make it so complex to where we have to think about it every day, like thinking about doing the thing, even if it's prayer, but overthinking how many rosaries, when am I going to pray? What am I going to pray? How am I going to pray? Because it's so complex and we're trying to juggle all this at once. We're thinking about praying too much. We should just keeping a simple rule of prayer that we can follow consistently day in and day out. And it is that simplicity, that kind of rough idea of, hey, I'm going to do this stuff every day. I know I can do it. It's not too daunting. But that simplicity to where we don't have to think about it, to where we can leave the gym at the gym. We don't have to worry about exactly what our split is going to do because it's set in stone and it's simple and we can remember it. And that simplicity allows us then in our free time, and when we're walking to the gym, when we're walking back, when our mind is wandering, to allow ourselves to more easily enter God's presence, because there's not something we have to get right with our routine, there's not something to overthink, and there's not something to worry about to try to optimize, because we have a simple rule of how we're going to do these things. This video could have been a lot shorter. I kind of just explained it well at the end there. But yeah, trying to keep simple rules for mental things, for routine stuff, to where you don't have to, consider what type of diet or how you're going to eat every day. You have some simple principles that you can remember to where you don't have to overthink it, to where you can spend your free time when your mind, when you're not thinking about anything, times in silence, to not thinking about what you're going to eat because it's not too complicated and you kind of know what you're going to eat. And then you can devote that free time, those thoughts to God, as that is what is pleasing to Him, and that is His will for all of us. So that's the video. Simplicity. Yes, it's obvious material simplicity, but mental simplicity. Simple routine, exercise, diet, rule of life, prayer, defaults, consistency, simplicity. I'm not trying to do too much, but trying to keep it simple. Keep it stupid simple. That is the video. I hope this helps. I'm praying for you all. Thank you for watching, and God bless.